All right, now let's look at Power BI sensitivity labels. Now, Power BI sensitivity labels are a feature within Microsoft Power BI designed to help organizations and you as a user protect sensitive information and ensure compliance and data governance whenever you have a sensitive data to protect. Now, every organization would have a degree at which they would like to protect their information. So you have some information protection policies and various governance policies, etc. And the aim or the goal is to simply allow users to classify data based on the various sensitivity levels and help control access and manage data security throughout the life cycle of the data set that you'll be dealing with. Now, take for example that you have information that is public facing. This could be information that could be on any public facing interface, your website, maybe your journal, or maybe your monthly publication, etc. But at the same time, you might also have very sensitive data, your trade secrets. You could have financial projections and various other types of financial interpretations with the various products you have in your environment, which you may simply want to ensure that they're kept secret. So any information that is kept secret or information that is regarded as confidential should be treated in a way that is a bit different from the way we treat public facing information, right? Oh yes, and that is where we begin talking of data classification. You simply want to classify different types of data sets. So you could have maybe one set regarded as sensitive, another set regarded as very sensitive, and all these will be classified in different ways. And once you have data classification done for the various types of data that you have in your environment, you then look at the various labels you can create within your environment, because it is now these labels created within your environment that would come with various conditions with them that would allow you to rightly have the data you've classified protected within your environment. For example, if I am creating something that is going to end up with our customer within the environment, and that customer is restrictive based on the various governance policies that exist, then we have to ensure that we have to adhere to that. Take for example that this particular client is in the health sector, and by virtue of them being in the health sector, they will have to be compliant to the various HIPAA compliance laws. And if they're HIPAA compliant, in the process of us creating our label, we'll then have to ask ourselves questions such as, what is it that HIPAA requires for us to integrate in order for us to rightly protect this particular data set? And then if HIPAA requires that personal identifiable information must be protected, then we have to do so. If a dataset or report that you're working with has personal identifiable information, we've got to make sure that all that data is protected. If HIPAA requires that only the users who actually are integrated or maybe in the process of sharing information and are involved in the project that deals with this particular organization must have access to that data, then we have to make sure that that policy adheres to that. And as the information gets to be shared, this particular dataset that contains that particular label, let's say that's our label over there, would be shared across our environment, bearing that particular label to signify how important or very sensitive the data that it carries is. And whether it's on our SQL server, or maybe you're sharing it from our MySQL and it goes to Power BI, or whether it's Power Apps or Power Automate, this would allow everybody who actually interacts with our document or data set to know how sensitive that data is. And if at all somebody tries to share that information, maybe save it to their local drive, maybe try to email it or whatsoever, they would actually be trying to do something that is a violation, one, and secondly, that would also be able to give us information as administrators that somebody has tried to share this information in violation of the various policies or rules that exist in the environment. And this is a great way of ensuring that we have protection against exfiltration of data, we have protection against any form of violation that may actually jeopardize our security, etc. Hence, the need for us to have sensitivity labels in the environment, as they help us to become more granular in the way we're protecting our data. And by the way, if we wanted to set up sensitivity labels for a particular data set in an environment, we would have to ensure that the various users accessing that data have Power BI Pro, or they should go with Power BI Premium in order for them to be able to carry out these tasks. Well, let's take a look at how we can actually accomplish these within Power BI. Okay, so here we are within Power BI Service. Rule number one, ensure that you have the rightful privileges and access rights to the various environments where we have to configure these policies. So it's either you are a global administrator of your environment, or at least you have the tenant admin rights that allow you to perform these tasks. In addition to that, make sure that you have the rightful licenses in those various workspaces where your data that you simply want to protect exists. So like in this case, if I simply want to begin looking at what has to be done, I'll go and look at my workspaces. And from here, I would go to my workspace and go over to workspace settings. And over here, I can see the license configuration. This is set to Pro. That is the least that you'd actually need in order for you to create sensitivity labels. If you have the premium one, great for you. All right, other than that, we have to shoot and go to the portal admin area. So in order for us to achieve that, we'll go to the menu, and from here we have the admin area. This allows us to have access to the admin portal. This is the area where we can configure the various policies and the labels that we simply want to see within our environment. So over here, let's go and expand this area under our menu, and from here we'll go and access compliance. By opening compliance, we're simply accessing the Microsoft Purview. Now, if you're old school and you're comfortable with creating policies and labels in this area, go ahead and help yourself. You can still create policies in this area. But if you simply want to go and explore the various features and tools that Microsoft has recently integrated within this particular area, then we have to go and access the new portal. Now, the new portal simply allows you to have access to all the great interfaces and features that you can simply explore. If you're doing that for the very first time, you might be required to agree to some license over here, and you would then be ushered into that area. But because I accessed this prior to us going through this process, you'd notice that that won't actually pop up at this particular point. So what do we want to do? We simply want to go and create our policies, and those policies would fall under information security or information protection. So let's go ahead and open that tab and begin creating our labels. Oh, before we can actually go and create our label, I just want to quickly show you what kind of an error you might encounter in the process of trying to create a label or a sensitivity label within Power BI prior to you configuring this within Microsoft Purview. So if we go back to Power BI service over here and go to our cog for settings and access our admin portal, this is actually the area where you would have to enable sensitivity labels. So over here, we simply have to access information protection, and there you can see allow users to apply sensitivity labels to content. Yes, that's what we want. So when you come over here trying to enable this feature, prior to you configuring information protection within Purview, you'd actually get this error. If you click on apply over here, it'll actually give you a prompt to say, hey, we're going to configure this in the next 15 minutes. But lo and behold, you'll be served with this error. So you first of all have to configure it within Microsoft Purview prior to you coming to this area to carry out this configuration. So back into Purview, now we can begin the process of creating our labels. So let's go and click on go to labels over there, and once we're in this area, you'll notice that we've got a label over there, and the name suggests that this is the kind of label that does not have a lot of restrictions. However, the rule is that you have to create a label and thereafter publish it in order for the various users who are interacting with these sensitive information to be able to apply that label to those datasets. So let's go and create our own. We'll click on create a label over there. So we'll give it a name. Let's say this is going to be confidential data, and then we also have to give it a display name. Now, this is a name to simply identify this label when it is listed on the list of labels we have in our environment, and this is the name that will be displayed every time users are looking for those labels in the sensitivity area in order for them to apply them to the datasets they're working with. So from there, we also have priority. You can always set this even at a later stage. Priority is simply a way of identifying the rank of importance amongst the various labels you have in your environment. It also determines how they'll be listed once users begin to access them. It's also great to have a description that will allow users to understand what exactly is happening here. You might also want to add a description for admins. Now, this would only be visible to administrators within your environment. Could be your security administrator, your compliance administrator, or anybody who is actually able to manage the various labels that exist within your tenant. The importance of having a description for admins is that in the event that we are managing the various labels, we would simply have an understanding of what each and every label does and what the impact of deleting or updating that label would be on the environment that we have. So having that would really be great. And you can think of the time when you leave that particular role, maybe you move to a different department or you move to a different job. It actually serves as a great way of documenting what those labels do. The person who would come after you would greatly appreciate you for leaving information on what every label does within that tenant. Now, you also have colors. I haven't really used this area over here, but if you simply want to emphasize and just put it out there to say, hey, this is very important, thou shalt not share, you might want to have that in red or maybe in green, whatever color of your choice. However, this has no significant impact on what the user actually does with that sensitive data. Now let's go ahead and click next, and over here we have the various areas or the scope to which you can actually go ahead and apply. Now you'd realize that most of them are pre-selected for us, and if you simply want to maybe deselect some, maybe you do not intend to protect information that is email based, that could be in Outlook, etc., you can go ahead and deselect those. If you don't intend to protect anything in Teams, you can deselect those, but I'm happy with all these choices over here. Let's go ahead and click next. Here we can decide who should have access to the various labeled datasets that we have in the environment. If we've got an Excel sheet that is labeled, we can say we would only want this to be visible to this particular group. And we can choose those once we've selected control access over there. We can also have various markings, such as a marking on the footer or the header or in the body of that particular document, or maybe an Excel sheet to say this information is regarded as sensitive, and we can have each and every dataset that is being shared carry that label. So we can do so by having that content marking application. Let's go ahead and select next. And over here, we can begin looking at the various access control settings. So if we simply want to give the various users within our environment access to apply these labels to the data they'll actually be accessing, we can use the let user assign permissions option over here. But in our case, we simply want to assign those permissions now. And the other exciting features that we can leverage over here, take for example that you have a project where you're making use of various datasets and you simply want to ensure that people have access to those datasets for a limited period of time. You have options over here such as access to content never expires, or maybe you want access to that content to expire the moment the project is over. You can simply specify the date over here, or you may simply want to specify the number of days after the label has been applied. We'll go ahead and select never for this option. And then access to content offline, we simply want our users never to have access to content if they're offline. And once that has been configured, we can then go ahead and apply it to the groups that we have in our environment. Let's go ahead and just say all users and groups within our organization for now. Of course, you can choose the various options that are provided here to meet the requirements of your environment. So click on save, then click on next. Once the group has been added, we'd like to have content marking for our data. Notice that if you choose the content marking, it's important that you also add a customized dataset over here. For example, we simply want to specify that this is sensitive data or tape sensitive over there. Click on save. And with that in place, we can then progress and click on next. Which brings us to auto labeling. Now, auto labeling is when you enable automatic labeling of various datasets that you have based on the content that is contained within that data. Now, you use different types of classifiers to be able to achieve that. For instance, if we want to make use of that, we could go ahead and say, hey, let's create a new group over here. And then we could say, let's have various classifiers for that type of data that you're simply dealing with. For example, if we say sensitive info types over here, and then select sensitive info types from here, which are likely to be found within our dataset, we then can add those. Let me quickly search for finance. Perhaps we could find something under finance. Okay, now we can't find anything under finance. What about if we say money? All right, maybe we couldn't really see anything under money. How about HIPAA? So can we see anything that has to do with health? Well, it doesn't really seem to pick up anything. But anyway, we have options here such as Canada Health Service Number. We have Finland European Health Insurance Number. So these are info types that are sensitive within that particular policy that you're creating within your environment and should be added to the various labels that you're creating for your users. You have to ensure that they're added. And once you have them added, you can also play around with the various settings such as instance count, the medium confidence. Is this low confidence, should be regarded as high confidence, and you can make those adjustments as desired. You also have an option to make use of trainable classifiers. Trainable classifiers are actually very dynamic. They begin to learn your data classifiers and understand what kind of information is sensitive within your environment and look at how that information can be protected. Well, let's proceed and look at what we can do next after that. We have options over here to define protection settings for groups and sites. We're not looking at that for now. Just go ahead and select next. Auto labeling for schematized data. If you'd like to really label data at schema level, you can go ahead and do that as well. It's currently in preview, but you can play around with it and figure out how it would help your data and your organization. And then if we click next, this comes to the review area where we simply review the various settings we've set up, and then we can create our label. Once this label has been created, we then can go ahead and publish it within our environment in order for us to be able to make use of it and allow users to apply it to the various datasets that exist within our environment.